based on logic and facts. I think it is illogical to run a business in a way that you destroy ultimately the value chain upon which the business depends. That man from Unilever who got this whole Unilever journey started several years ago, a decade ago, said, I'm just trying to get people to understand in my business, no fish, no fish sticks. At that time, they were the largest seller of fish sticks, that particular kind of fish product in the world. No fish, no fish sticks. Well, that's the logic. But there's more than logic going on here. There's more than just open-mindedness. There's a certain quality of humanness that's essential. It's not just open minds, it's open hearts. In the middle of that 3 days in Guatemala, Sherry, the woman who organized the project, very intuitive, she just kind of does what feels right to her. She's now been leading a revolution in how supply chains are managed in the food business for Costco. In the middle of this, she found out about 6 months into the project that the founder of the Farmers Cooperative they were working with had a son who had been killed in an automobile accident. Totally, just coincidental. Had nothing to do with corruption or gang warfare or anything like that. A lot of what they do, when you're an organizer of farming cooperatives, it can get pretty violent. That nothing to do. He was killed in an automobile accident. And that they'd never had a full mass. All the people were coming together for these meetings, so the founder, Tulio, said, Sherry, we'd like to have the mass for our son, Juan Francisco, at this time, because everybody involved in our business is coming together. And Sherry said, can we come also? So literally the way they started off this 3-day meeting to look at the social, environmental study of the food chain was they all sat through a high mass, 3 hours, in Antigua, Guatemala, in a church where they had this. And Sherry said, I turned next to me and I looked at Frank. Now Frank is the vice president for supply chain for Costco. It was a big deal. The vice president was flying all the way from the United States to rural Guatemala to participate in these 3 days of meeting. No one had planned this out. They decided almost at the last minute to go sit in this mass out of respect for the farming cooperative and all the people who knew Juan Francisco. Sherry said, I turned next to my right, and there was Frank, the vice president, in tears. She said, I had no idea what was going on. I could tell he was deeply moved. Turns out Frank is Mexican-American, grown up in a Spanish-speaking home. And he told her later, he said, it's the first time I've been to a mass since I was 5 years old. And my whole life history came back to me. And I really could feel what it meant for these people to have a good business partner. So these are ultimately never matters of just logic. Remember Ari DeHus's statement at the beginning? What is the difference if we start to see this literally as a human community first, which if it functions well can create successful businesses, rather than the other way around. So in a funny way, it all comes full circle. The ideas have always been there from the beginning. When asked, what do I see this organizational learning work all about? I've always found myself coming back and saying, well, it's really simple. It's just people being their best together. How do you create an environment that brings out the best in human beings? And the same is true now with all these sustainability challenges, except that human beings are not just the managers inside one company like Costco, and they're not just their suppliers. They're the whole of the interconnected system that you need to make business work. It's a new journey. It's terra incognita. No one has the answers. Paul Pullman said a funny thing in the middle of the MIT session. So first he talked for a few minutes, then Barbara Stockey talked for a few minutes, and we just opened it up and had a conversation. In that open conversation, one of the people in the audience, of course, this is 300 or so, mostly business people, all graduates of MIT, here to celebrate MIT's 150th anniversary. And they're just kind of blown away. Paul Pullman, I mean, these are all on Unilever's website. The company intends to double its sales and halve its environmental footprint this decade. That means a four-fold increase in energy use, in energy efficiency, water efficiency, everything. I happen to know, inside Unilever, every single business has KPIs, critical performance indicators, which are economic, social, and environmental. Every single business has those. So he's telling all these things, and he's pointing out that, yes, we're going to double sales and have our environmental footprint. We're going to have 500,000 smallholders in our global food chains. And finally, somebody says, you know, this takes an incredible amount of courage. And Paul said, I guess so. He said, well, you know, just actually last month, we canceled quarterly meetings. He just said this kind of offhand. Now, I'm assuming most of you are business people here. I'm assuming most of you know that no big business thinks it can survive if it doesn't have a meeting every quarter to brief its analysts. He said, no, we just canceled. They just reinforce short-term thinking. And we have a long-term view of where we're going. We don't want our investors just thinking short-term. So didn't your stock price fall? Yeah, it fell a little. But not anymore. People realize we really know where we're going. And I thought to myself, for the CEO of one of the 50 largest companies in the world, just very casually to say, oh, by the way, we've canceled quarterly meetings. No, yeah, it does take some courage. And then he said, I didn't ask for permission. I just did it. And in that audience, which is about the size of this group here today. So there are amazing things happening. I just told you a few stories. For everyone I've told you, there's another 10 or 20, only a few of which I know. It's the beginning of the beginning. Profound changes are starting. Oh, by the way, that man from the Chinese Communist Party, very few people in the West know this. This is not just in businesses, this is happening in some governments too. In October of last year, the Communist Party made two announcements. Everybody in China knew about these. Very few people outside of China heard about them at all. One, they reduced the growth target into single digits. First time in 35 years that this 5-year plan has a 78% growth target. And secondly, they said they want to reduce the carbon intensity of the Chinese economy 40 to 45% this decade, by 2020. You multiply those two and you see that in the Communist Party they basically said, we are going to stop the growth of greenhouse gas emissions this decade in China. This planning is now going on province by province throughout China. Every single province is developing their own strategy for decarbonizing their economy. And you know what? Remember the left leg of the stool? It's not just a problem for them anymore. They're very clear. They're going to be selling renewable energy to the world. It's a huge opportunity. So this beginning of the beginning is not just a few global corporations. It's also occurring in some countries. Particularly ones, I think, that are really have a belief that they can shape their own future. That's it. Thank you. Please have a nice evening. If anyone wants to visit, I'll stay around. The way this was designed is we're just supposed to end so people can go, but I'm happy to stay around and visit with people for a while if you'd like to. Good evening.